Hello there, classmates. This is Jeremiah Ramsey, and I welcome you to the wonderful scenery of the Northwest here in Washington. In this video, I hope to introduce you to the basic concepts of databases and database administration. I want to make it easy to understand and even enjoyable on the way. Let's take a look.
So, here we are in the office. Let's get started. So, before we get started, let's read dictionary.com's definition of a database. They say, a comprehensive collection of related data organized for convenient access, generally in a computer. So, I want to go here to open Office and just draw a table for you. Here a full table with columns and rows. So this direction obviously are the columns and this direction are the rows. Now they can also be called fields and records. This, for example, would be the employee ID field or column, and this is the employee ID, the last name field. This is the first name field, and so forth, while this here is the record for Joe R. Smith, or the record with employee ID 5007, or this here is the record for Carla Jones. And so that's pretty much the basics of how a database is set up. You just have tables like this, and you can have many of those tables, and then somehow you're going to try to connect them together. And one of the ways to do that is to use something called a primary key. Now, a primary key is a field that is unique for every record in that table. So if we look at this, it turns out that all of these are unique. Employee ID is different in all of them, last name is different in all of them, and so forth. None of these have the same. But, of course, this is only one small part of the entire employee table. And what you do is you use a unique field like the employee ID field, because you're going to, by definition, have that be different. It's an ID, so it's going to be different for every single person, every employee in that table. There could, for example, be several people with the last name Smith, or someone with the same birthday, date of birth, as someone else. So, we make here the employee ID field, or this column, the primary key, so that it'll be unique. In order to see how a primary key is used, let's add another table here that I've prepared. It's for basically offices. So these are the IDs for offices in the company. Office 209, 210, and here we see what department they're in. So the people that sit in Office 209 are in sales, and those 210 through 213 are in marketing. And then here in 301, there's the executive. The executive branch of the company sits in Office 301. So now, how can we connect these two tables? First of all, we'll need to go to this table and add a column. Let's name it Office. Office ID. And we can add, let's say, Joe Smith and Carla Jones are both in marketing in room 211. So they're both in 211, but Bradley Ungersma is in sales, and he happens to be in room 209. So here we can see that the Office ID comes up in both tables. In the employee ID, it shows what office the employee in that record works in. So we see that in the Joe Smith record, there under Office ID, there is 211. And for the 5008 Carla Jones record, there's 211. So now we see how the primary key in the office table is used in the employee table. The relationship between these two tables is called a one-to-many relationship because there are so many office and so many employees, and one office can have many employees in it, but one employee is never in many different offices, at least not at this company. In this company, we never have a person, an employee, who works in more than one office. So this is a one-to-many relationship in that there's only one person can only be in one office, but there can be many people in one office. So now that we've seen what a one-to-many relationship is, let's see what a many-to-many relationship looks like in tables. So what we'll need to do next is create a table called projects. So the first field will be project ID, and the next one will be employee ID. And so we actually just need 2 for this. So I'll go ahead and get rid of that column. So we'll now start putting in projects. But it turns out that many employees can work on the same project at the same time, but one employee can also be working on multiple projects at the same time. So we may be running into a little problem here, because if we want, let's say, since this is the projects table, we want project ID to be the primary key, right? So let's say we have project 685 and project 686 and project 687. We now have, let's say, both Joe Smith and Carla Jones working on this same project. So we can't, how do we put multiple employees in? And the thing we need to do is actually just do multiple records for the same project ID. And you may be asking, wait a minute, how can we then have a primary key here, since multiple employees are in the same doing the same project, and let's say Carla Jones is also working on project 687. So we put 5008 both in the 685 record and in the 687 record. We have neither this column is unique nor this column is unique. So what you can also do is called a primary key that is a composite key, which means that it is made of more than one column. And the way that works is simply the combination of these two columns, or sometimes 3 or 4 columns, but in this case it's 2 columns that make up the primary key, or the composite key, need to be unique. So we see here that 685 comes up twice, and employee ID 5008 comes up twice, but each combination is unique. So let's put Bradley Ungersma there. So we see that this one is different from this one because the employee ID is different, and this one is completely different from all the rest. And here, even though the employee ID is the same as in this second record, the project ID is different. So that's another way to do primary keys, in this case specifically composite keys. And the power of this is here that we have a many-to-many relationship. We could have a table that is that defines the projects. Let's say it's project ID, and then you have the project name. So let's put in there, let's say the 605 is a list of emails for the marketing department that they want to send a particular thing to, and they need to create the list, and that's the name of the project, so it would be the marketing department. One could do things like that, and then we'd have lots of project IDs mentioned here that have their names and other information that's pertinent to the project, but we couldn't do this, put employee ID there, because it's a many-to-many relationship. So in this table, this project table, this one should actually be called a project table, not this one. Let's call this one the project table, and it would have the primary key of project ID. But this table here would have it would perhaps be called a project employee many-to-many table, or simply projects and employees, and it's a many-to-many, and it has the composite key, as opposed to a simple primary key with just one column. So this table, this first one we had, the primary key is employee ID, and we have a list of employees and information about them. In this one, the primary key is office ID, and it's a list of offices, and the primary key is office ID since those are all unique, and we see some information about the office. And then in this last one here, we have project ID as the primary key, and that's always unique. We'll have information about each of these offices and each of these projects and what their names is, what department it is, and so forth. But we can't have this employee ID there. For that, we need to have another table called projects and employees, or something like that, where we can connect the project table to the employee table. And so we see that we can use the primary keys from two other tables, to make another table that has the primary keys of both, and together they form a composite key. So that's basically how a many-to-many relationship works.
I hope this video gave you a good overview of databases and database administration. I'd appreciate any feedback.